Welcome to the Unshakable Hope podcast, where real life intersects redeeming love. I'm Kelly Hall, and this is where we wrestle through faith questions such as how do I trust God's heart when his ways and delays are breaking mine? We'll hear from people just like you and me who have experienced God's faithfulness when life didn't unfold as they expected. My prayer is that God would renew our hope in his word and his love through these conversations. Hey guys, I am so glad you're here. My guest story today is such a powerful picture of our God who is always on a rescue mission. I pray this story will infuse hope and faith into wounded hearts in all of us, but particularly those whose stories have been affected by heartache and fear through addiction. Dawn's entire story has been shaped by addictions of loved ones, starting in her childhood, later affecting two of her children, and then even her husband. You'll hear of his miraculous story about 3/4 of the way through this conversation. Dawn shares how God healed her from constantly trying to control every situation and even healed the guilt and shame she carried. I'm so inspired by her deep trust in God through some very hard surrenders and the beautiful ways God made himself known to her as healer, helper, and deliverer. Dawn has so much wisdom and experience her book will be drawing from. It's titled From Guilt to Grace, Hope and Healing for Christian Moms of Addicted Children. I'll tell you a little bit more about Dawn. She's the founder of the Faith to Flourish ministry, which equips women to live transformed lives through biblical teaching and mentoring. She also offers support and encouragement to women with addicted loved ones. She's married to Steve, and she's mom to 3 adult children. So Dawn, welcome to the show. I'm so grateful you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to our time together.
Me too. Well, I'm so thankful we were able to get together. We had to cancel. You've had a lot of life going on. So the Lord has opened up some space for us. I'm wondering if there's anything about yourself that you would like to add to your bio.
Well, a little side note, I do have a ministry for women who struggle with addicted loved ones and supporting them, and also a Bible teaching ministry. But that was not my career. My career for the last over 25 years has been a medical esthetician. And I did skincare and plastic surgery and dermatology. And that really, through that long period of time of spending time with women, I got to know them. I got to hear their hearts. And so many came from different faiths, different backgrounds, different beliefs, different financial situations. Some were single, some were married. But it gave me such an appreciation for the heart of moms, wives, daughters, sisters, and it helped me to see really how the Lord sees each person and how much he loves each person. And so I'm really grateful for that time. I had a hand injury, a subsequent surgery, and I was retired a few years earlier than I expected because of it, but it just made room for this opportunity for me to finish writing my book and to just see where God's going to take me next. So that's a little bit of a side story on me.
Well, I love that. You have a heart for women because you know a lot of their struggles and you know the depths of where those struggles can take them.
Mm.
I'm wondering if you could describe how addiction became a part of your story. Just share with us whatever you'd like.
Okay, great. I have to really go back to my childhood. As a young child, I started realizing something wasn't right in my home. And it was that my dad would drink. And when he drank, he was angry. He didn't hit anybody, but he just yelled, and it was just a very toxic environment. And as a young child, I can remember even a few years old, just being really afraid. And again, I don't think it was ever that I was afraid for physical safety. It was just my dad was a very loud man. He was a fireman. Was a veteran. He was such a public servant. He would give us the shirt off our back, anyone the shirt off his back. And if it was the last shirt he owned, it's very generous, very kind. But when he wasn't at the fire department, he would start drinking beer. And it seemed like he would drink it early and it would go so long. And as I grew up, I realized that really my dad didn't have an off switch. He would drink until basically he passed out most times. And also his brothers, my uncles also drank, and 3 of them were firemen, but they got happy and they joked around and everything. And so Here I'm really kind of confused, like, I didn't understand any of this, and even as I got a little bit older, I didn't understand, like, terms like alcoholic were used back then, and to me, that was always that image of, like, a guy on Skid Row with an empty bottle, like, stupor, that kind of a thing. I didn't think of it as somebody functioning, and because my dad would black out, there would often be times that he would deny what happened, so that caused more confusion as a child. But the biggest lie I was exposed to was that it was my fault and my siblings' fault that my dad drank. That always seemed to be something. You kids fight, you kids don't get your homework done, you don't get to keep the house clean, your mother's always nagging me, you drive me to drink. For whatever reason, that really hit my soul, my personality. I was the firstborn, and I took that on as real and as truth. And so when I was about 4 years old, the Lord reached down. I wasn't raised in a Christian home. Sure, my mother took me to church on holidays occasionally, but I wasn't raised in a Christian environment. And so one day when I was about 4 years old, I remember the Lord, I was hiding because my parents were fighting. And the Lord reached down to me and he said, "Take my hand and don't ever let go because you're going to need me for this life." I didn't really know that was Jesus. I need Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. But I knew somehow God was speaking to me. And it was something that I did hold on to him. And, I mentioned that I discipled myself because, like, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? But the Lord was just faithful throughout my lifetime. When I would start to kind of veer off and stray away or whatever, he'd always pull me back in. And because my love for him and his love for me. And so, as my parents eventually got to the place where they did divorce, and I was older by then. I think by the time they divorced, I was almost 18. By then, I was rationally understanding what was going on, and that while my dad was holding down work and very financially stable and all of that, that the family life was what was taking the hit because of what he did and, because of what he was struggling with. And I say what he did because he also did leave my mom for another woman. And so that was part of the reason too. And so because of that, I started looking at things differently, like, okay, this isn't all about me. This isn't all my fault. It's not all about the grades I get and if I have the house clean and all these things. The problem was much bigger. But I still was young and still trying to figure it out. So all I knew was that I wanted to make sure my children didn't drink. After seeing it, being around my dad's friends and things like this, I really said, this is a big problem for a lot of people. And in my family, I didn't know much about, is it genetic? Is it passed down? Is it generational? I didn't know any of that, who even knew any of that stuff 40 plus years ago. And, and so I wanted to just guard my children from that. When I started having children of my own, I think I parented out of a position of fear, that I was afraid that would happen to them. Even though I was a Christian and my husband was a Christian, everything I did as far as parenting was this hyper vigilant way of protecting and warning. And everything was like, don't cross the street, you might get run over by a car. Instead of, I'm mommy says, don't cross the street without holding her hand. Everything was that caveat of, you might get hurt, you might get killed, and all of that. So my mind thought that way. Instead of just expecting obedience, it was obedience so you won't get hurt, obedience so you'll stay safe, obedience so you won't use drugs. And I did not realize any of that back then. My oldest son is 38 now. So it's a lot of years of parenting for me and a lot of years of healing for me to recognize what it was that was that motivating emotion that was driving me in my parenting. So I talked to them all the time about alcohol because that's what I understood. I'd never been around drugs. I didn't understand drugs. I hadn't seen drugs. It wasn't even on my radar to look for drugs other than just saying no, kind of that Nancy Reagan campaign back in the day of just saying no to drugs. I didn't really know much about them. I would teach my children. I have 2 boys and a girl. She's my youngest. And just be careful with alcohol where it's concerned. Our family has a lot of problems with that. We don't understand all of the neurobiology, pathology, also the spiritual side of things. We don't understand all of that. And it's just better for you kids to be really careful with it. So when my middle son was 17, he was in his senior year of high school, I noticed a decline in his appearance, his grades, his attitude. I think I caught him smoking, and I was like, what is going on with this kid? I would never smelled alcohol on his breath. If anything, I think I might have suspected there might have been some marijuana involved, but he didn't really even smell like that. And so I was having a hard time, even when I would interrogate him, figuring out what was going on with him. He had always had a desire to go to college. He'd always played sports. He'd been in Christian school up till his senior high school. And so he had a lot of Christian friends. But those all kind of shifted too. And he was playing in a band in school, but then they started a garage band. And, that's probably where I was a little naive too, and thinking, well, the parents are home with the kids. Little did I know the parents are like letting them be out there in the garage, hanging out, banging away on the drums and guitars, and they're out there smoking pot and stuff. So what happened was I would interrogate him and wouldn't really get anywhere. Didn't even know there was such a thing as you could go buy a drug test at the drugstore. I thought I'm going to have to take him to the doctor and have the doctor run some sort of pathology on him because I don't know what's going on, but he's not himself. And that just really, kind of where I was at. And because that would not be the kid I would have thought would have done this anyway. If anything, I would have thought I would have had problems with his older brother, and he was already in college, and I really felt like we dodged that bullet. And so this particular son, I had never acted out. He'd never done any of those things. So it really wasn't on my radar. So one day he did come home and he asked to speak to my husband. He went upstairs and he told his dad, I'm using something and I don't know what it is and I don't know how to get off of it. They told me it was marijuana, but I can't get off of it. I can't stop using it. And neither can my friends. And so at that point, we didn't even know what we were dealing with. So when we went and took him to get medical, assistance to see what was going on, we got word back in the toxicology report that black tar heroin was in that. And that's a highly addictive substance that they were smoking. And so hear him never having any exposure to drugs at all. And I'm not excusing it. He shouldn't even touched marijuana. But the kids, that's kind of a gateway drug for kids. And now that it's legalized everywhere, I have my own opinion about that. That's not a good thing. But it's kind of a gateway drug. And a lot of kids, that's where they stop. And a lot of kids keep going. And the predators that are selling these addictive substances on the streets full well know that it doesn't take these kids very long to get addicted to these substances. And so that was in there. And so that's where the actual detox back then was probably only a few days. We did it medically supervised. And then he started getting, therapy and counseling and the different things. He was only 17. And he asked for help. And so his story was such that he realized he was hanging out with the wrong crowd. He kind of worked through some of his things, but he did have some hiccups, he did have some relapses. And we just really all decided after he graduated that the best thing was for him to go out of town and to move out of town and get some extra faith-based Christian support. He was at that time not even using, but just to make sure he didn't fall back into that. He actually became a mental health counselor, became addiction. He worked in an addiction treatment center, and he did that for a few years. And ultimately he did decide to finish his college degree. And he's been doing really well now for probably about 18, 19 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he was only 17 and he's 36 now. And so as we got kind of over that, and remember now he's living in another state, so we're driving back and forth to show our support. We're doing things to help him get back on his feet, making sure he's playing by all the rules, staying accountable, doing all of that, and finally feeling like we're settling into our routine. And his older brother at that point had a surgery for what we found out at that point. He'd been struggling with a health problem for his entire life that no one could figure out.
Oh, my goodness.
And it turned out it was a congenital birth defect. He had a hypotensive sphincter, and they actually had to wrap his stomach around his esophagus. But it took till he was 25 for the doctors in another state to figure out the problem and do this really radical surgery. Well, that was right at the time when Big Pharma was saying that the pain medications were not addictive.
Mm-hmm.
And he was drinking liquid, Vicodin and Percocets and whatever it was they were giving him. And for quite a while, because it was a good month or so that he wasn't just only on a liquid diet, then he was just on a very soft diet. And it took a while to get him back to where he could eat normally, where that esophagus was stretched enough. And just a lot of pain that came with it.
Oh.
But the side note is that I think he'd always struggled with mental health issues like depression, anxiety. I do believe that some of this chronic pain that he lived with growing up and, like throwing up and things that were giving him problems that just he had no control over caused him so much anxiety, almost to the point of phobia, where he would almost get agoraphobic. Like he would never eat if he took a girlfriend out on a date or anything for fear that that would happen. And so when these drugs hit his system, it was like mother's milk. He felt relaxed. He felt pain-free. His mind rested, and it was just such a good drug for him.
Yeah. Probably for the first time in his life, he had relief that he didn't even know he needed.
So where my other one really just didn't want anything to do with this, he has not taken another opiate. I think even with surgery, he's been able to avoid it and just go with other types of pain relief and all of that. This particular son really liked it and wanted and felt so much. He's like, I feel normal. But, the problem gets escalated very quickly. And then going to mental health professionals like psychiatrists who are there to help them, they should not be prescribing other addictive substances along with knowing their history of addiction. So they were prescribing things like benzodiazepines, which are those Xanax and those Valiums and things. Come to find out, those are some very difficult drugs to get off of and stay off of. They tend to be amnesiacs. A lot happens where they're operating almost normally and then don't remember any of it. And so this really brought him much lower and became a more chronic problem, where we had more of what I would say is that traditional struggle that families deal with, where they're in and out of relapse, in and out of sobriety, in and out of treatment, in and out of programs, doing well for a while. In our case, jail, mental health breakdowns, suicide attempts, DUIs, rollover car accidents he should not have walked away from. And just all of that came with it. And my son was an adult when this happened. And whereas my other son was a minor, I protect his story a little bit more. This son has, throughout this journey over the last 13, 14 years, 15 years now, he's had his own podcast where he's discussed with other people in recovery what they've gone through and all of that. And so his story I'm able to share a lot more of, and to be able to talk to parents about understanding all those things that can happen and that emotional roller coaster that we go on. And in my case, by the time it hit son number 2, I had already felt bad enough for the first one and more blaming myself with guilt for like not catching it sooner. I kind of realized now it hadn't gone on that long before we found out. So I had caught it. I just didn't know what I caught. Sometimes you just don't know what you know. Give yourself a break, right? But by the time number 2, I was like, Mom, any kind of get out of jail free card I had, no, that at this point, it's on me. Everything from my childhood, any of those things I was healed from that God had shown me and revealed to me, at this point, that one ginormous lie that it's all your fault, this should never have happened if you were doing your job as a mom, not working full time, whatever it was, keeping a better eye on them, whatever it was, all of it hit me. Yeah, just like a tsunami. That was when I took until then I was doing triage, but at that point, just triaging the situation. But at that point, I was now living with, this situation where our family was on life preservation, like we were in ICU, like we were in critical condition. And that was when, for me, I really came to that place of brokenness.
Yeah. I remember one time just saying to the Lord, everyone in my family is in crisis in some form or another. And I know that's what you were feeling like God has just left us. We have been abandoned. What is going on? And with the additional lies that you were living with, that was so incredibly painful. Now, there's a lot more to the story. There's a lot more good, but I do want to say this too. It just breaks my heart, all that your older son went through.
We've had numerous relapses since then. And I say numerous because it appears to me that he tends to maybe even have like a cyclical depressive disorder or perhaps seasonal depression, that type of thing, because it seems like it does happen in the winter. And some other time, it may happen another 6 months are a little bit longer, 6 to 9 months, and then it might happen again. And so he seems to get about 6 to 9 months of sobriety before something happens. It's very cyclical for us. It seems as though he's starting to figure that out and working on those skills to help him handle that better. But, it's really kind of a journey of acceptance as far as realizing, wow, this one, barring a miracle and God really doing an intervention in him, it's a long journey. This one's a long, wearing journey for us. Because people often ask me, like, do you seem like you have it all together? And I'm like, no. My son was living with us up until a few months ago. And one morning I caught him and I had to have him leave the house. And he did go back into a treatment program, and he did, get himself sober, and hopefully he'll do all the things he needs to do to walk that path. But the journey is not for us a one and done journey by any means.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, because I love having people on whose stories are not resolved or wrapped up with a pretty red bow. And because you have learned how to rely on the Lord in ways, in deep ways, in transformative ways. And so we're also going to talk about your husband and what happened there in a little bit. But first, I'd like to just take a moment and talk about how you got from a place of guilt and self-blame that was so paralyzing for you. The sorrow you felt for your sons was just paralyzing almost, but the Lord met you in that place and brought transformation over a period of time. So can you talk to us about that?
Yes. It really did take a conversation from my husband. Even though I was going to work in a very professional field. I had to be on my best all the time, plastic surgery and dermatology. You just got to be on your game. And I was doing lasers and chemical peels and all this. So I put so much focus into my work. And I felt like I was doing okay because I was functioning by all outward appearances. And a little side note is that my daughter is 33. She still lives with us. She's on the autism spectrum. So she's this little silent sufferer. But because she's quiet and all of this, I'm not even really dealing with her stuff. I'm protective of her. I won't let him live in the house with her and active addiction and all of that. But there was a lot of balls that I was trying to keep in the air. And because those balls appeared to be where they needed to be, I didn't realize what was going on with me. What happened when I look back now is I realize the stress and what it can put on parents and on mothers, especially wives, whoever's going through this and trying to help someone who's self-destructing, is that your brain can get very stressed out. And your brain, it can take a lot of toll on your whole body, your adrenal, your cortisol. Past traumas have a lot to do with how you react to things and respond to things. And what happens is it can only deal with so much. And that does not have anything to do with your faith. And often people think, well, if I have faith and I'm trusting God, I won't feel this way. But it's his power is made perfect in our weakness.
Yeah.
And so we often have to understand that I'm weak because I need to rely on Jesus in this. In this area of weakness in my body, my emotion, my mental strength, I have to rely on him to help me because I cannot do this on my own. And so as I worked, as I look back now, I realized that 24/7, I was hearing a record or a radio playing in the back of my brain. It was almost like I heard it in my ear, but it was in my head. You have to fix your son. You have to save your son. You have to fix your son. You have to save your son. It was in my brain. It wasn't just, spiritual warfare or anything like that. Somehow my brain couldn't turn it off. And it was this force that was compelling me to constantly, when I wasn't working, researching better treatment centers. Should I send him to Costa Rica? Should I send him to Mexico? What should I do to save him? I cannot accept that he could die. And these drugs have progressed. And now we know that people who were using heroin are now using fentanyl. And fentanyl is much more deadly and much more potent. And so as these fears would start to compound, one day my husband said to me, Dawn, you're going to worry yourself to death. He saw me just driven, up all night and looking for help. And I said, you know what? You're right. You can put that on my tombstone. She worried herself to death. I actually saw a big gray tombstone. And And I heard the Lord say to me, no, I wanted to say she trusted God. I'm going to make sure that gets put on my headstone or what urn or whatever I end up in. Because the Lord said, I want you to say you trusted God. And I remembered that conversation him and I had when I was 4 years old about holding on to his hand and never letting go. But I didn't know what it looked like. I thought I trusted him.
Right, right. That's such a beautiful picture. I love that as a child, Jesus came to you and invited you in that way. It's so tender, it's so personal. And so he was doing it again.
He was. He was.
Holding your hand. Come
Yeah,
on.
he really was. And he was letting me know that I had kind of, put him in the back of the back seat of the car and said, come on, Jesus, come along for the ride. And forgot that his place is the driver's seat. And I'm just supposed to crawl up in his lap. And if any of us have ever sat in our dad's lap when they drove a big farm truck or something, because I was from a farm community, that was always so fun. And you felt so safe. And it felt like anything that you were, no matter what happened, you'd be safe. And so I thought about that kind of a mental picture with Jesus, is that he's not asking me to even drive the car. He's asking me to let him do it. And I've got to get my hand off the steering wheel. And what I was doing is reaching over and grabbing that steering wheel, like, oh no, Jesus, we're going to go right. We're not going to go left. And all that was going on. And in that moment, I said, okay, well then if I'm going to agree to trust you, I said I trusted you. You're telling me I really haven't. What does that look like? And the first thing for me was literally, it just popped right into my head. Google help for moms of children who struggle with addiction, for Christian moms of children who struggle with addiction. I didn't find a lot of Christian per se, directed help. I found moms groups and things like that. And it wasn't like I had never gone to a 12-step meeting or that I hadn't gone to Celebrate Recovery. And it seemed as though back then they focused more on the person struggling with the addiction than the person struggling as their caregiver, their supporter. And so I would get pearls from these things, but I often ended up leaving so depressed and feeling like all I had heard was such hopeless stories.
Right.
And that wasn't good for a head that was saying, you have to fix your son, you have to fix your son. That wasn't good for me. I needed to find that person or people that could say to me, hey, there's hope, and trust in Jesus because he loves your child more than you do. And that type of a thing. And just to really nurture me spiritually and to help me see the forest through the trees, because I was just so overwhelmed.
Right. More than that, he was inviting you into surrender. Dawn, give me this story. I am your keeper. You don't have to keep yourself. I'm the one who's going to transform this. You can't do it. You let go, trust me. And so I know he was just continually inviting you into surrender. Let go of your perfectionist, fix-it tendencies and your controlling tendencies. Let me take over. That's one of the things it looks like is just letting go and believing you can say, when it says in the Bible, trust in the Lord with all your heart, not lean on your own understanding, that it's really an invitation to peace and hope and surrender because God has good plans and he loves us and our children more than we can imagine. I love the chapter where you talked about the fact that we can let go of these labels because God's restoring the truth about who you really are. You're a masterpiece. You're designed by God to do good works that he chose ahead of time. And so a lot of the transformation occurred within you as he invited you into the truth of your identity and helped you to let go of hypervigilance, where you're just constantly on edge trying to say, I got to stop this. I got to prevent this. I have to protect this. And he helped you learn to trust him and surrender to him in that place.
He really did. When I first Googled, help for Christian moms, I did find a woman and her story. And her book wasn't directed to Christian women, but she herself was a Christian. And there were a couple Bible verses and things like that in there. And through a series of events, we happened to connect with each other and be talking. And what I told her I was doing with the book was that I kept going through it and answering the questions. It was a workbook. But I was using it like a Bible study. Every single question that didn't even have a Bible verse attached, the Lord was taking me to his word.
Mm.
And I went through it like 3 different times. I had scriptures in every single space in this book. And it was all just like this book here, it was all dog-eared with all the Post-its and all of that. And So we got to talking and she was laughing about it. And over time, what that led to was her and I wrote a Christian version, a faith-based version of that book. But in the process, I started to see that there were so many things out there that were kind of like lies that were told to us in the addiction community, and not even blaming them. People don't know what they don't know. If they do not have Jesus Christ, who is the truth, it's really easy for things that are meant to be to help us to end up actually causing us more harm, more guilt, more shame because of the wording, because of the mindset and all of that. And for me, that was where the Lord started showing me like all these rules, all these steps, all these different things are not freeing to you. My word is freeing to you. If you're going to walk hand in hand with me, like I asked you to since you were a little girl, that's going to mean you're not always going to know the next step. You're not always going to know the next place I call you, the next thing I tell you to do. And I don't want you to lock yourself into, use these things as helpful tools in a tool bag, but don't live by them. And growing up in the environment I grew up in with rules and all of these things, that was, for me, a step of faith. That was a step of trusting God to say, oh, I can't just pick up one book and do A, B, and C, and everything's going to be okay.
Right, right.
And
That's
you
the
know,
big faith step.
a big faith step. And one of the things in the 12-step community, it's kind of out there and everybody says it all the time, is you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. And that was a little mantra that helped me a lot in the letting go process of what things can I control? That serenity prayer of, of accepting the things that I can't control, but having the courage, to make the changes that he's asking me to make. And so while those weren't in the forefront of my mind, it was that direction of saying, like, Dawn, this every day, look at what you can't control and surrender that to Jesus. And then the things that he's asking you to actually engage in, things that you can control, trusting him, faith steps that he's asking of me, letting go. What does that look like? That was a huge deep dive for me to learn how to disengage from the day-to-day drama without detaching and just wanting nothing to do with my child at all. Jesus knew how to, everything Jesus did, we can learn from. He knew how to go into a very difficult situation, when to step out of it. He knew how to reach out with compassion. He knew how to correct sin. And then he knew how to pull himself away and go get rest and go stay with it and go be with his Father, or get sleep or get nourishment. He knew how to do that. And he taught us such a well-balanced life by observing his life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that helped me a lot too. Was like, Dawn, you're never going to be Jesus. He's God. And you're never going to do everything perfectly, but we're to follow the master, the teacher, and to make disciples of men means to actually to imitate the teacher. That Jesus wants us to imitate what we see in him, and these things that he did that we would also do. And that became for me more of my focus of how would Jesus want me to handle this situation? How would Jesus handle this situation? Well, if he could just put his arm on me like when I was 4 years old and say, Dawn, this is what I want you to do, what would that look like? So for me, it really became a journey of tuning into that voice, of that still small voice of the Holy Spirit, trusting when I felt peace in my gut and I was making a decision based on faith over fear and anxiety, learning to wait and hold space for the Holy Spirit to speak to me, to say, your kid's calling up, it's an emergency, I've got to have all this money, there's all this crisis going on, and I'm reacting out of that flight, or fear. Flight, flee. Or I'm sitting in a place of faith and waiting and trusting and saying, Jesus, is this really life and death? Or is this something I can sit on and wait till I hear from you? And so those were some of the things that I learned in this process of what trust looked like and how to live that out.
Those are very good. Very good. It made me think of 1 Peter 5, where it talks about casting your cares on the Lord. It's just like this hurling thing. And you can do that in a crisis. You can just, I need help, and just throw it at him. And you also have to quell the temptation to start researching and fix it. And that's so often been my temptation with girls that have some mental health issues or Lyme disease. issues where we could have gone to 5,000 doctors and had 10,000 treatments, and they've had so much medical trauma. I really had to look to the Lord and say, this is the situation. This is so big. I don't know what to do. And I love that prayer from Second Chronicles 20. Like this vast army is coming at them in verse 12, and the king prays, we don't know what to do. We have no way to defeat this enemy, but you do. So we look to you. We look to you.
Amen. That really was a life-preserving chapter, Second Chronicles 20 for me.
Me too. It has been so huge for me. I like the life preserver idea.
Yeah, he had some big problems that King Jehoshaphat. So I'm like,
Yeah.
all of these armies are coming at him. So I'm like, I think you got me handled, God. The way he delivered those people was pretty amazing.
Amazing. But so many times these crises can feel exactly like that. This vast, insurmountable, undefeatable army is coming at us, and we've got no way out and don't know what to do. One of the beautiful scriptures, I'm going to add this, and then I'd like for you to tell your husband's story, is when you were just overwhelmed with the grief of your son's suffering and it was paralyzing. And I know what that feels like. You talk about a verse in Matthew 10, and I'm just going to read it, which just captures the tender heart of our God. It's a beautiful picture of Jesus. It says, 2 sparrows are sold for a penny, yet not one will fall to the ground outside of your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered, so don't be afraid. You're worth more than many sparrows.
Yes. When I got that, when I got that Jesus not only saw me, but he saw my son and how much love he has for him and for the different people in my life that I was travailing over, that I was worrying over. And when I finally grasped that, I understood that I could feel grief for the challenges my son was facing. He's a brilliant man. He's kind. He's sweet. He's a hard worker. For the most part, I see him constantly growing and figuring this out and getting stronger. But when I would see this and I would just be so sad, I would think, this has so many consequences and every time this happens, it has more consequences. And I just see it and I'm like, Lord, even just providing for his needs and just his bills and his food and all the different things and all the questions parents deal with trying to take care of somebody and help, but not help too much and not enable and all of that confusion and just grief for his future, just for like opportunity lost and all of that. And then when that verse gave me so much comfort because it did help me to know that, God is perfect and he's a perfect heavenly father. And his little birds are falling from the nest and and his little sheep are going astray and all these things are going on. And he cares. And it hurts him when his children are suffering and maybe making life destructive choices or trapped in behaviors and addictions and things like that. And in some cases, they don't survive, or in some cases, their life doesn't turn out like we had hoped or God had hoped for them, but he cares deeply. And so that verse really speaks to me too.
Well, I love the sovereignty of God that he sees all of our days laid out before him. He is outside of time. He is always wooing us to himself, speaking to us like he did for you as a young child, and drawing us to himself and providing rescue for our soul healing. And there is not a moment is lost to him, not a tear falls without him seeing it. And his heart for rescuing is so much more immense and powerful and able and capable than we can imagine. And so the thing that helps me so much is just to focus on the bigness of my God's heart and that there are rescues happening behind the scenes that I had no idea about. And so that is just a beautiful picture. And I know that our children, our loved ones are never so far gone that the outstretched arm of God cannot reach them, cannot save them. Doesn't matter where they are geographically or where they are in their hard stories. His arm is there and he is on the move on their behalf.
Amen. As far as my husband goes, a little bit of backstory there is that he had a car accident and it led to multiple back and neck surgeries. And ultimately he's had 5 fusions, a couple of shoulder surgeries, just different things. And so he became a chronic pain patient also and was always taking pain meds and all of this. Not having, he always functioned well. He didn't seem to have the addictive side of the personality that it just like take them all in one day. But he was getting to that point where he was completely dependent on them. And so, of course, now I'm trying to not only I'm trying to hide these pain pills from my son. And that's a whole nother story, but it's amazing how clever they are at finding these things. And I'm just like, there's the enemy, just like, hey, go into that room over there. Your mother's got that thing hidden over there. I mean, it's just like supernatural for them to figure out where these things are at. And I'm like, that's coming from the enemy and just wanting to destroy them, that they could be so resourceful at obtaining these medications and these drugs and things like that. And so with my husband, we would often keep him locked up. There was things that we would do so that he could take them regularly and that we wouldn't find things missing. But over time, I started noticing that he also was really running out of his prescriptions too soon, dealing with a lot of pain. We couldn't go on vacation if he ran out of them. We were having to head home. And we got him some help. We got him off the pain meds till he needed another surgery. And then I policed the pain meds after surgery and did all of that. And so when the time came that I found out that he was using them again, and I did not know. In other words, I did not know that there wasn't a surgery that had kept him on them. That one came completely out of the blue, that he was using these drugs. I knew he needed another surgery and I knew he was in pain, but I did not know he'd gone back to getting them and abusing them. And one day the Lord revealed to me, and when the Lord does speak to me, it's really kind of some peculiar things. He'll say, like, go into his closet. Like, I'd be asking for maybe months. What's going on? Something's not right. And I'd be like, what's going on financially? Something's not right with our money. There was things like that, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And when the Lord finally decided to reveal it, he'd be like, well, go into his closet in that coat that he never wears that's plaid and look in the pocket and you'll find out. And it was like so specific that there's no way I could have thought about it.
Right.
It's just like a God thing. And so then I would go and I'd find gambling receipts, that type of a thing. And so this time that this happened, the second time where I had no idea that this had all started happening again and all of that, I just was like, get out, like, get out. He had actually gone to also illegal drugs. He was also smoking what was on the street because he couldn't get the prescriptions anymore. And taking pills off the street and stuff like that. And that just hit me like a boulder between my eyes, because it was like, my gosh, your daughter lives here. How could you get to this point? What is going on? This is surreal. You got to go figure this out. And he did. He went and he actually went to Arizona where you live. He went to where my son was living at the time and, saw a doctor there. Didn't have to go into any kind of a treatment or anything like that. But while I was here and I was just like figuring out, like, I'm probably going to divorce this man. I don't even know anymore. I can't live this way. This is just too dangerous. I've had drug dealers out in front of my house and they'll come calling and it puts people at risk. And I want parents to know, like, do not be naive. Don't think your little Johnny isn't mingling with dangerous people if they're using illegal drugs, right? I remember the Lord saying to me, in James, it said to go and ask, if you need to be healed, to go and ask the elders for prayer and that your sins will be forgiven. And so I remember calling him and saying, the Lord told me to tell you to go to a church and ask the elders for prayer. I didn't know what church, because I even butted in. I said, God, what church should he go to? And the Lord says, I'm not concerned about that. Just a Bible believing church, and that's it. My husband doesn't even remember that conversation with me. He said that God told him to do it. And so he went to my son's church and went forward and asked the pastor for prayer. And the pastor directed him to the elders that were at the side praying, a husband and wife team. And he waited because somebody in front of him needed long prayer. And my son was trying to get him to go have lunch. And he's like, no, I'm not leaving. I'm supposed to stay here and receive prayer. And of course, he just didn't even go up there for anything like confession. He went up there saying, my life is miserable. I'm in so much pain. My pain's a 10 out of 10, which it was. It was unbelievable pain. I feel for people who suffer with chronic pain and severe pain, nerve pain and things. And so he just was like, I started using drugs and pain pills and I couldn't keep up with it and I'm a mess. And they didn't even ask for much detail and he didn't give them much detail. But as they started to pray for him, he felt like God, like Jesus held onto him. And he said, he heard Jesus say in his ear, I forgive you. And immediately all of his sin passed before him. And so that was the thing in my husband's case. And my husband's such a good person. I'm like, well, I probably took about 5 seconds because he's such a good person and he's so kind and he thinks of everyone else first. And he's never ever like nagged me or picked at me or complained to me or anything. I do all those things, but he doesn't do any of those things. So it was all really about his relationship with God. Yes, lying. Yes, being deceitful. Yes, not trusting God, not being honest with his wife, those things. But more than anything, when I asked him what it was, he's like, I think it was really an inner heart surgery that was going on for him. But what I noticed immediately was a hunger for God's word that he hadn't had. We've been married coming up on 45 years. And I'd never seen that kind of hunger. I was always like, why don't you pray with me? Why don't we read the word together? Why don't we, no. And it was just that completely, that switch just went off. And he became so hungry for the word of God and so passionate about the Lord and can't even talk about the experience, even to this day, which is probably 4 years later, without crying
Mm.
because of what Jesus did in him. And he's like, I was one way and then I became another way. And we had that real supernatural experience of life change for him. And even though he's had to have surgery since then, it's never been anything, even if he's had to take them just for the 7 days, he just gets off of them and goes right back to ibuprofen and those things. And so for me, it's not a matter. People say, how do you trust him? And I said, because I can see the fruit of his love for Jesus. And this is between him and Jesus.
Mhm.
It's between him and Jesus. And that gave me a lot of hope for how God works in everyone's life. It may look different for each person, but that's that love that he has for them, that he's going to meet them right at that place of brokenness so that he can restore them.
Mm. Wow, that's amazing. I love how the Lord transformed him. I love the ways God has transformed you.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the first things God does. He transforms us by stepping deep into our mess and holding our hand as he allows us to take a closer look at our own soul and leads us into soul healing out of the wilderness of brokenness and so many places where we are relying on coping mechanisms rather than on the Lord. And that's the most beautiful transformation that occurs. One of the things it feels like sometimes is heart surgery. It feels like a soul surgery. He is after our kids' hearts, our loved ones' hearts, and I know he's continuing to pursue your son's heart.
Yes. And I always tell the moms, I do have an online Facebook group. There's about 4,000 moms there. And so we support each other, Christian moms of addicted children. And I always say, mamas, pray for their salvation before you pray for their sobriety.
Mm,
Often they think the other way around. Let's get them sober and cleaned up. But Jesus can speak to their heart, to that deep area that even if their mind is blitzed and fried and all of that, he knows how to get in there and get into that deep area of their heart and speak to them. And so my encouragement is always to do that. And also that letting go thing. That's, it's not a one and done. It's a daily sacrifice.
yeah.
That I've been crucified with Christ. I no longer live, but he lives in me. The life that I live now is that I live it through him and through faith in the one who died and gave himself for me. And so it's this constant crucifying of our flesh. And I think about that with the story of Abraham and Isaac. We often look at that and we think, well, what was he doing? Like, how could Abraham take his son up there? And even when his son questioned him, I'm like, where's the sacrifice? And God, and Abraham's like, well, God will, he'll supply the sacrifice. And going all the way up there and getting ready to raise the knife to kill his son, but knowing that this was the son that God promised him, he was going to be the father of many nations. His descendants were going to be too many to number, like the sands of the sea. And so he knows this promise that God has given him, and yet he's going through the process of obedience and laying his son down. And so there's always that possibility you'll get that phone call. There's always that possibility that, your child, as much prayer that you pour out, feeling like you've done all the things right, and you still could get that knock on the door. I think that part of surrender that was the hardest for me, it wasn't one and done. It happened. The Lord takes me through it often. But that process of trusting him and trusting him with my child's life, but holding on to the promises I believe that he has for my child at the same time. It's really faith. It can feel a little convoluted. It can feel a little confusing, but it's one of those things where Jesus was like, Abba, if there is a possibility that this cup can pass from me, please take it from me. But nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. And I think the Lord's Prayer is so significant for us as we daily lay down our children and as we lay down our own lives and place them at the feet of Jesus, that we place them at the feet of a dear Father who loves us and cares about us. And everything he's doing in us is for our good. And we can't understand that. We kind of wrap our mind around that when bad things are happening, but we don't see the whole picture. And that's where I had to stop being a Jacob and a doubter and wrestling with him and just needing to have the answer and having it now, needing to have the blessing and having it now, and just learning to wait and rest in him.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good word. That's a good word for anyone who is listening.
Thank you.
Well, Dawn, I'm wondering if you could just let people know where they can get in touch with you.
Sure. I do have a webpage, thefaithtoflourish.com. And I also teach Bible studies and try to just encourage women of faith, no matter what they're going through. So there's a blog on there. There's some information for the women who have loved ones that are addicted to find some more support on there. And then I'm on the social media sites under The Faith to Flourish or Dawn R. Ward. And then for moms who maybe are looking for a support group, our group is a little bit different than other groups that are on there. When the Lord had me start that group, he really wanted me to focus on praying for our children, encouraging the moms, and glorifying him. So within our group, that's what we do. We just pray for each other, encourage each other, offer each other hope. We're just trying to nurture and take care of each other and encourage each other in our faith and in our walk with the Lord.
Well, Dawn, thank you so much for the gift of your time today. This was beautiful and encouraging. And I'll continue to lift up your family.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you were encouraged in your faith today, it'd be great if you'd help get the word out by subscribing, sharing with a friend, or leaving a review. I'd love to hear from you. You can reach out through my website, kellyhall.org, and pick up some free resources while you're there. Thanks for listening to the Unshakable Hope Podcast.